Okay, guys, we're going to pick back up with part 2 of the video for chapter 3, and I'm starting at the bottom of page 37, that little blurb about calculation of inpatient service days. And so what you see at the bottom is another definition, or the same definition, about how we're going to do this. So the calculation of inpatient service days is the measurement of services received by all inpatients. Remember, so there's inpatients in one 24-hour period, and we're talking about, remember, that time between census taking hours. Usual reporting period begins at 12:01 a.m. and ends at midnight. And then again, remember, moreover, one inpatient day must be counted for each inpatient admitted and discharged on the same day in between census taking times. And we're going to talk about A&Ds in just a minute, but I do want to talk about kind of what you're looking at. If you'll follow along, I don't necessarily have a screenshot, but if you'll follow along on page 38 and 39 with me, when you're taking a look at what your book has laid out for you, especially what's on page 39 under the example, just know that on that example, what they're showing you happens to be a manual way on page 39 of keeping the census. So lucky for you and me that we're not doing much of this anymore manually. And I'm going to just scroll down for a minute and skip ahead to exercise 3.6. And if you had me for face-to-face class, you would know that sometimes I'm all over the place. I will decide, I'd rather jump to this part of the chapter and just show you how it's done. So I'm going to skip ahead to 3.6 while we're talking about calculation of these inpatient service days and what the heck you're looking at that they introduced to you on page 39. So what I've done is kind of highlighted the columns that belong together. All right, can you see that? So all the adults and children go together. We know we're keeping those little pesky, precious newborns separate because, as you learned in your chapter reading, those newborns can skew, or another word is inflate, your calculations, and can actually make them incorrect because unless you're a hospital like Women's Hospital that we have here in Greensboro, unless you're a specialty hospital that deals with moms and babies, you're going to find that we're going to keep adults and children and newborns separately for the majority of the calculations in this book. And then I'm going to turn around in a couple of chapters and we're going to add them back in, and that's going to be completely confusing, but we're going to get it. But for right now, as far as inpatient census is concerned, to keep myself organized, because when you're looking at page 39, holy cow, that is a lot of information, and you're looking at like, what the heck is all that stuff? So this is what I do, y'all. I highlight all of the columns that I know belong to adults and children. And so that when it's time for me to have a calculation in a block, I know what I'm doing. So let's talk about that. So at this point, you have been working on calculating census. And I know we haven't specifically done it sitting here in this lecture, but you've had a little bit of practice, because if you're reading through your chapter, then you're working the exercises as you read. And then, like I said, I'm going to post a video on how to work things out, and hopefully that'll be super helpful for you. So, but getting started here, we know that based on our reading that we always have to start with the night or the census the day prior. And so to that, we're going to add from that, my mouse disappears, from the adults and children, we're going to add the discharges, so I have a plus here at the bottom. We're going to add the transfers in, because remember, y'all, this is intra-hospital, okay? And then we're going to come up with 51. So 48 plus 2 is 50, plus 1 is 51. So our total matches. Then we're going to take that 51, we're going to subtract the discharges, so we're at 50. We're going to subtract, oh my gosh, my mouse keeps disappearing. We're going to subtract the transfers out, and that's going to get us to 49. All right? And so to calculate this column, the inpatient service days, we have to grab the admissions and discharges. So let's talk about that for a second, because you see I have A/C written here when they weren't nothing written there in your book, right? On that particular exercise. On page 39, if you were to flip back under service days, you'll see A and C, but here you don't. So I just want to make sure that you know that if you don't see it, that's what admissions and discharges are. Very rarely, y'all, unless you're a specialty hospital, are you going to have an admission and discharge of a newborn infant, right? If you have a baby that may be born, I mean, you know, we can hypothesize until the cows come home. We can say, oh, wait, but a baby showed up in the ER and the mom delivered, and then it needed to go to the NICU, and we don't have one of those, so we sent it away. Maybe so, but those are going to be few and far between. Most of your admissions and discharges, y'all, are going to be adults and children. So I wrote that here. We're going to take our 49, our 1159 census. We're going to add that A and D. So we came up with 50 service days. Okie dokie. Likewise, you can do the same thing for newborns. Okie dokie. So you can start with 2, and look over here in the admissions column, a BIR, that is birth. So just so you know, the only way that your newborns are admitted to your facility is they got to be born. All right, so that's why it's a BIR. If you have a baby born in a car, and it comes to your facility, it's going to be an admission. It's not going to be a birth at that point. And actually, it's going to be a PEDS admission, which is going to fall under adults and children. The only way to be a newborn is to be born in the facility. So you've got newborns, so you're starting with 2, you're going to add that 1, and there are no transfers ins and outs for newborns, so 2 plus 1 is 3. So if you're keeping up over here. Then we're going to take this 3 and we're going to subtract out the 2 newborn discharges, and we're going to come over here and we should find one little baby with their head in the bed at 11:59, right? And then we're going to transfer that 1 over to this column under inpatient service days, because remember we just said that adult and children, goodness gracious, that adult and children column is A and D's for them. So then you can see what I've done is not the service day column, because remember the service day column accounts for these A and D's. We're wanting actual head in the bed census to start back at this column. So I pulled 49 and 1 and put them right here. Okay, so this is our starting point. So again, we're not using this column because this has admissions and discharges in it. And they don't have a head in the bed, y'all, because they're not there. So their heads are in the bed here. So 49 and 1, 49 plus 3 plus 2 is 54. Then we're going to subtract, we're going to subtract the 4 discharges, the 2 transfers out, and we're going to come up with 48. So then we're going to look at our admission and discharge column. There's a 1. So 48 plus 1 is 49. Then you can go back through and do the newborns too. So I jump ahead to that exercise to show you I feel like it goes a little better. It does for me. I'm pretty simple, y'all. I have to mark up my textbook, make myself a lot of notes to keep things squared away. Do you want the even better news? The even better news is when you get to 3.9, right? I don't want you to work on that. That's not anything. It's an exercise in frustration is what it is. Because if you get off one day wrong, your whole daggum calculation is wrong. So I think that's frustrating. And you want to even know what's better? I don't have anything like this table or that table on the exam. So, or your homework. So you won't, the concept is good. You'll continue to do these calculations, but in a different way. Okie dokie. So I skipped ahead, so we're going to roll back over to the top of page 40, where it goes over transfers in and out again. It talks about a fancy word, recapitulation, which is big and fancy for recap, right? So you're just recapping that your transfers in and your transfers out match, that you didn't lose a patient somewhere along the way. And so then the next to last bullet says newborns are considered separately for all computations. They should be reported separately unless otherwise directed by administration. So for your purposes as a student in the RHIT exam, you know those pesky little newborns, when we're talking about census, we're going to keep them separate. And then the last bullet, again, goes over when the census taking time typically is. But remember, we said, hey, a facility can do it whenever they want to. They just have to be consistent across the board and when they're doing it. And also it does talk about some terminology. So this may be a good time to discuss the terminology used in inpatient settings. The hospital may be referred to as the house, how many patients are in the house. So that goes along with our how many patients have their head in the bed. And you will probably hear me talk about different sides of the house, the clinical side of the house, the administrative side of the house. And that's just something in hospitals and medical centers. It's one of those just like things. So now you know, right? So we call it the house. Okie dokie. So we need to talk about A&Ds. Well, we've been talking about them a little bit, right? When we talked about the daily inpatient census and inpatient service days, we talked about these dang people who come into your facility to receive services in between census taking times. And remember, if we don't count them, we're losing out on a lot of major information. We're losing out on the services we provided, the supplies we used, all kinds of things. So just because they don't have their head in the bed at census taking time doesn't mean they're not important. So we lovingly refer to them as A/D or A and D. I mean, your textbook talks about in and out, but I'm going to be real honest, y'all. Other than the textbook, I've never seen I and O. I've seen it mostly like this, and then using the ampersand, the and symbol. So you just know that those admissions and discharges aren't used on the head in the bed census. They're only used for daily inpatient census and inpatient service days. And those are the people that were admitted and discharged between a census taking time. Okay, so you're going to get lots of practice with A&Ds, so you should feel super comfortable by the time it's time to take a quiz and a test. All right, we talked about that. Okie dokie, so the average daily inpatient census on page 43, and you'd be like, why in the world does she have knuckles written right there? And so that is when I wish I had my webcam plugged in to show you what I mean by knuckles, and I just may do that here in a minute because this video is getting ready to run out. So the average daily inpatient census is the average number of inpatients present in the hospital each day for a given period of time. The total inpatient service days for a period, usually a month or a year, represent the inpatient service days for the calendar days in that period. And then, ta-da! Here's your first formula. You see what I've highlighted? You've got a note. So the formula says total number of inpatient service days for a period, excluding newborns, divided by total number of days in a period. So we're going to get to that probably in the next video. But the first thing is I want to stop and I want you to listen to me when I tell you follow the formula. If you get an email back from me or we have a phone conversation or you are not going to want to hear me say over and over and over again, if you had followed the formula, you would have gotten the problem right. So don't be freestyling. Don't be thinking that you should change that formula up. If you follow the formula, and you get the numbers in there correctly, you're going to get it right. But when you start trying to read into the formula or add things into the formula that don't belong there, that's where you're going to get yourself into a little bit of trouble. So that's why I highlighted excluding newborns. That is reminding you that, hey, this is for adults and children, right? This is our total number of inpatient service days for adults and children. So this is super nice. They're actually giving you a reminder here. And your textbook goes over some examples too, but I'm going to stop right here and we're going to pick back up with the knuckles and you may see a webcam. All right.